Hey guys, tonight we settle into the warm, flour-dusted sandals of an ancient Egyptian baker. Picture this. The air is thick with the promise of freshly baked bread, the kind of yeasty perfume that whispers of hearth and home, all mingling with the earthy scent of Nile silt and the cool, inky blackness of a world yet to greet the sun. We're diving deep into the extremely quiet life of someone whose daily grind was, quite literally, grinding grain. Honestly, the sheer, unadulterated quiet of this baker's life, day in and day out, punctuated only by the rhythmic thump of kneading and the sigh of the oven. You'd probably be climbing the mud brick walls by lunchtime, desperate for a TikTok notification that's still several millennia away. It's a life of profound simplicity, a meditation in monotony, and perhaps, just perhaps, a surprisingly soothing journey for us. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly helps this little corner of historical quietude thrive. And as always, I'd love to see where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your part of the world. Drop a comment below. It's like a global campfire for history nerds, and I love it. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Darkness. Not just any darkness, but a profound, velvety black that presses gently against your eyelids. It's the kind of quiet that hums, a silence so deep it has a texture, a weight. You are suspended in it, floating in the moments before true consciousness takes hold. There's no jarring alarm, no distant traffic rumble. Your internal alarm clock, powered by sheer force of habit and the desperate need for bread, mostly other people's bread, but still, is beginning its slow, inexorable tick. You feel the rough weave of a reed mat beneath you, its surface cool against your skin. This is your bed, a simple affair laid out on the packed earth floor of your small dwelling. It's not exactly a 5-star resort, more of a 1-star and it's probably serious kind of deal. Comfort is a relative term here, in the fertile lands bordering the great river. You shift, a small rustle in the immense stillness, and your head rolls slightly on its support. Not a soft, yielding pillow, but a carved wooden headrest, cool and unyielding. A quirky little invention, these headrests. The ancient Egyptians believed they helped keep your head elevated for better spiritual connection, or perhaps more practically, to keep the scarabs from staging a midnight expedition through your hair. You're not entirely convinced it does, much for a stiff neck, but it's all you've ever known. Slowly your senses begin to peel back the layers of sleep. The air in your one-room home is cool, carrying the faint, lingering scent of wood smoke from last night's small cooking fire, now long dead. Beneath that, a more persistent aroma, the dry, dusty perfume of old clay from the mud brick walls that surround you, baked hard by the relentless Egyptian sun. These walls, a common feature in the homes of everyday folk, are your primary shelter, simple yet effective. They keep out the worst of the desert heat and the chill of the night, though they're not exactly soundproof. Not that there's much sound to prove against at this hour. A deeper breath, and you detect it, the faintest, almost ghostly whisper of the Nile. It's not the smell of water itself, but of life it sustains. Damp earth, crushed reeds, a subtle, almost metallic hint of minerals carried from distant lands, and perhaps, if the wind is just so, the far-off tang of unseen fish. The river is the lifeblood of this land, the giver of all things, and its presence is a constant, even when unseen and unheard. Historians often note that the entire civilization was, in essence, a gift of the Nile, its annual inundation depositing the rich black silt that made agriculture, and thus your daily bread, possible. You don't think in such grand terms, of course. For you it's just there, a background hum to your existence. Your eyelids flutter. The darkness inside your home is almost absolute. There are no windows as such, merely a small, high opening near the flat roof designed more for ventilation than for light. A common architectural choice to keep interiors dim and relatively cool during the scorching days. Through it, no hint of dawn yet penetrates. The world outside is still wrapped in the deepest indigo of pre-dawn. You stretch, your muscles complaining softly from yesterday's labors, the familiar ache in your shoulders, and back from hours spent stooped over the grinding stone, the heat of the oven. Every baker knows this feeling. It's a dull, persistent companion. Your limbs feel heavy, reluctant to embrace the demands of another identical day. But the rhythm calls. The village will need its bread. The temple might have an order. The cycle must continue. You swing your legs off the mat, your bare feet meeting the cool, slightly gritty earth of the floor. For a moment, you sit on the edge of your sleeping mat, letting the last vestiges of sleep fall away like desert sand. What did you dream of? Egyptians often placed great importance on dreams, believing them to be messages from the gods or portents of the future. Sometimes you remember vivid, chaotic images, but this morning it's just a blank slate, a quiet emptiness that mirrors the world around you. Perhaps no news is good news, even from the dream gods. You reach for the simple linen kilt lying beside your mat. It's your daily attire, a practical garment made from flax, one of Egypt's most important crops, fashioned from the finest, slightly scratchy linen because comfort was a concept they were still beta testing, at least for the common folk. The fabric feels cool and familiar as you wrap it around your waist and tie it. No elaborate wardrobes. Here, life is stripped down to its essentials. A small clay pot sits in the corner containing your water supply. You pad over to it, your bare feet silent on the floor. Lifting the lid, you dip a smaller clay cup inside and draw out some water. It's cool, refreshing, and only slightly tasting of the clay pot it's been lovingly stored in. Adds character, you tell yourself as you take a slow sip. Hydration is key, especially with the day of heat and toil that awaits you. The silence. It's still the most powerful presence. It's not an empty silence, though. Your ears, attuned to the quiet, pick up the infinitesimally small sounds. The almost imperceptible creak of the wooden door frame as the night air continues to cool it. The distant chirp of a hopeful cricket. Perhaps the soft rustle of a gecko hunting unseen insects on the outer walls. It's the sound of a world holding its breath, waiting for the sun god Ra to begin his daily journey across the sky. You consider, for a fleeting moment, the grand cosmic order. The priests in the temples speak of Ma'at, the concept of order, truth, and justice that underpins all of creation. Your life, in its small way, contributes to Mayat, the predictable cycle of producing sustenance. Then again, Historians still argue whether the everyday rituals of a common baker, like your own carefully guarded sourdough starter you'll soon tend to, held more personal spiritual weight than the grand, impersonal ceremonies performed for the gods in distant, towering temples. You, on the other hand, are pretty sure your most pressing spiritual connection is with that lump of starter and ensuring it hasn't decided to expire overnight. That would be a disaster of, well, not quite biblical, but certainly inconvenient proportions. There's no rush, not yet. But a sense of purpose begins to gather within you. The bakery, your domain of flour and fire, awaits. It's a place of hard work, yes, but also a place of creation, of transformation. You take raw ingredients, humble grain and water, and conjure forth something essential, something life-giving. There's a quiet satisfaction in that, a thread of meaning woven into the otherwise unvarying fabric of your days. Another deep breath. The air is still, heavy with the last remnants of night. Soon, the first birds will begin to tentatively chirp. Soon, the distant silhouette of the acacia trees against the eastern horizon will sharpen. Soon, the world will begin to wake. But for now, in this quiet cocoon of your home, it is just you and the profound, ancient stillness. You are a tiny speck in the vast expanse of the Kemet, the Black Land. A baker poised on the cusp of another day. A day that will be much like the one before, and the one before that. And in that predictability, there's a strange, sleepy comfort. You wouldn't trade it. Mostly because there aren't exactly a lot of other career options prominently displayed on the village notice board, which, incidentally, hasn't been invented yet. You rise, the simple act a commitment to the day. Your shadow, barely visible in the gloom, stretches and merges with the deeper shadows of the room. Time to face the pre-dawn chill, to begin the familiar walk, to once again coax life from flour and fire. The extremely quiet life continues, one silent pre-dawn moment at a time. You unlatch the simple wooden door of your dwelling, a construction of rough-hewn planks that grumbles a sleepy protest as you pull it inward. The air from outside spills into your small home, noticeably cooler and carrying a fresher, wilder scent than the still, close air within. It's like an overly enthusiastic but well-meaning Labrador giving you a morning greeting. A bit of a shock, but ultimately invigorating in its own way. You pause for a moment on your threshold, a liminal space between the deep quiet of your sleep and the gentle stirring of the world. The darkness outside is no longer absolute. The eastern horizon, far beyond the flat silhouette of the sleeping village and the dark ribbon of distant palm trees, now holds the faintest blush of bruised purple and soft gray. The stars, those brilliant diamond chips scattered across the indigo velvet overhead, still dominate the celestial display, but their reign is subtly challenged. Sirius, the bright dog star, watches you with a knowing twinkle, as if to say, "Ah, the baker, right on time." You step out, your bare feet pressing into the cool, slightly damp earth just outside your door. The ground here is a mixture of packed dirt and fallen leaves from a nearby sycamore fig, a tree sacred in its own right and a silent observer of your daily departures. You pull the door closed behind you. The soft thud of wood on wood echoes momentarily and is then swallowed by the immense pre-dawn quiet. The path awaits. It's less of a yellow brick road and more of a slightly less brown than everything else dirt suggestion, a track worn into the earth by your own feet and those of the few others who live in this slightly more secluded part of the village outskirts. It winds a little, not out of any grand design, but simply to avoid a stubborn clump of desert thorn or a patch of ground that turns too muddy after the annual inundation. You know its every dip and rise, every loose stone and soft patch as intimately as you know the texture of your kneading trough. You begin to walk, your pace unhurried, measured. It's not a commute driven by anxiety or the tyranny of a schedule, but a slow, meditative transition from rest to labor. The air is alive with the subtle sounds that only the truly quiet hours reveal, the high-pitched, almost metallic hum of unseen insects, a constant thrumming that forms the bass line of the night's receding symphony, the rustle of wind through the dry fronds of a distant date palm, sounding like whispered secrets. Perhaps the soft hoot of an owl settling down after its night's hunt, or the quick, furtive scamper of a small desert rodent diving for cover as it senses your approach. You might even see a desert fox slinking home after a night of whatever nefarious activities desert foxes get up to, probably judging your early start and wondering why anyone would willingly trade a warm den for a hot oven. The path leads you alongside a narrow irrigation canal, one of the many veins that carry the life-giving water of the Nile out into the thirsty fields. Even in the dim light you can see the dark, slick mud of its banks and the faint shimmer of slow-moving water within. This network of canals is a testament to ancient ingenuity, a system that allows your land to bloom where desert would otherwise prevail. Farmers will soon be here, using their simple shaduffs, a long wooden pole with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other, to lift water into their carefully prepared plots. It's a laborious, back-breaking task, this constant battle to hydrate the soil, but it's the foundation of everything. Without it, there are no lush fields of emmer wheat, no golden barley, and certainly no bread for you to bake. The management of these waterways, the allocation of this precious resource, is a serious business, sometimes leading to disputes that ripple through the tight-knit communities. You imagine it's probably managed with a complex system of he said, she said regarding water rights, seasoned with a healthy dose of hoping the gods are on your side this year. As you walk, you might brush against the cool, dew-laden leaves of plants growing by the path. The scents are subtle but distinct. The clean, green fragrance of reeds, the slightly peppery aroma of a wild herb crushed underfoot, the ever-present mineral tang of the dark, fertile earth. It's a perfume unique to this time of day, before the sun rises to bake the moisture from the air and release the hotter, dustier scents of the full Egyptian day. You carry nothing with you on this daily journey, save perhaps for a small amulet, tucked into the sash of your kilt. Maybe it's a little faience carving of Bes, the dwarf god, a fierce protector of households, women, and children, whose rather comical, grimacing face is believed to ward off evil spirits and misfortune. Or perhaps a smooth, worn stone that feels comforting in your palm. Many Egyptians carry such protective charms. The world, especially in these liminal hours between true night and full day, can feel full of unseen forces. The Wadjet Eye, the Eye of Horus, is a particularly powerful symbol of protection, health, and restoration. Its image found everywhere from grand temple walls to tiny personal trinkets. You don't actively think about warding off specific demons, but the presence of the charm is a small, familiar comfort, a tiny anchor in the vast quiet. Further along, you pass by other mud-brick dwellings, huddled together in the gloom like sleeping. Animals. Most are still dark and silent, their inhabitants lost in dreams. You see no flickering lamplight, hear no voices. If you see anyone else at this hour, a fisherman heading towards the river with his nets, or another early rising farmer, it's usually just a silent nod of acknowledgement exchanged across the distance. Pre-dawn small talk hadn't been invented yet, which, some might argue, was one of antiquity's true blessings, the quiet fellowship of those who greet the dawn by necessity rather than choice. The layout of these villages, the way homes cluster around shared courtyards or along these winding paths, is something scholars ponder. Archaeologists and historians still debate the exact layout and population density of typical Old Kingdom villages versus those of later periods, trying to piece together the daily lives of ordinary people from often sparse remains and the shifting sands of time. They meticulously map post holes and hearths, trying to understand how communities like yours functioned, how people interacted, how space was shared or divided. For you, it's just home. These are your neighbors, though you might not speak to them for days on end in your focused, quiet existence. The sky continues its slow transformation. The deep indigo directly above is softening to a lighter blue, while the eastern horizon is now a band of pale rose and soft orange, like the embers of a celestial fire. The brightest stars are beginning to fade, their light gently extinguished. By the approaching luminescence of the sun, the air feels a fraction warmer, the pre-dawn chill losing some of its bite. You can make out more details in the landscape now. The individual fronds of the palm trees, the texture of the mud brick walls of the houses you pass, the distant hazy line of the desert cliffs that mark the edge of the fertile valley. Your thoughts during this walk are like the river itself, sometimes flowing clearly, sometimes meandering, sometimes just a quiet, reflective pool. You might review the tasks ahead, the amount of grain to be ground, the state of your sourdough starter. You sent up a silent prayer, it's feeling perky this morning. Any special orders that need fulfilling. Or your mind might be entirely empty, simply absorbing the sensations of the walk, a moving meditation. There's a profound peace in this routine, this solitary communion with the awakening world. It's a far cry from the bustling, noisy cities you sometimes hear tales of, places like Memphis or Thebes, filled with grand temples, palaces, and teeming marketplaces. Your world is smaller, quieter, and in its own way, perfectly complete. The path gradually widens slightly, and you begin to notice subtle signs that you are approaching the more central part of your small village, where the bakery is situated. Perhaps the scent of old wood smoke is a little stronger here, from hearths that are kept burning low through the night in some of the larger households. Maybe you hear the very first sleepy crow of a rooster, a rather unconvincing heralding of a dawn that is still some way off. The village proper is still mostly a collection of champion sleepers. You, and a few others like you, are the vanguard, the dough-punching, net-casting, furrow-plowing elite who greet the day before it officially arrives, and then you see it. The familiar, squat silhouette of the bakery. It's a slightly larger, mud brick structure than your own home, its walls darkened by years of smoke and flour dust. It stands there, silent and waiting, its door firmly shut, its small, high windows like closed eyes. A sense of purpose, already stirring within you, now quickens. This is your domain, your place of work, your contribution. The fatigue of yesterday is a distant memory, and the challenges of the day ahead are not yet a burden. There is only this moment of arrival, this quiet anticipation before the alchemy of baking begins. You reach the heavy wooden door, its surface, worn smooth by countless hands, including your own. Your journey through the pre-dawn stillness is complete. Now, the bakery's own stillness awaits your touch, your breath, your labor, to transform it into a place of warmth, aroma, and life. You lift your hand to the bakery door. The wood is cool and slightly rough beneath your fingertips, its surface weathered by countless sun-baked days and surprisingly chilly nights. The latch, a sophisticated piece of anti-intruder technology that probably wouldn't fool a determined squirrel, is a simple wooden bar secured in a worn bracket. It yields to your familiar touch with a soft, dry click, a tiny sound that seems extraordinarily loud in the enveloping stillness. You pull the heavy door inward, its base scraping faintly against the packed earth floor. A wave of air, distinctly different from the outside, washes over you. It's cooler in here, sheltered from the open sky, and carries a complex, unique perfume. This is the signature scent of your bakery, an aroma layered with the history of countless bakings. Dominant is the dry, slightly sweet smell of old flour, a fine, invisible dust that coats every surface and hangs perpetually in the air. Beneath that, the earthy tang of the clay oven, even when cold, mixed with the faint, sharp scent of cold ashes from yesterday's fire. And woven through it all, a subtle, almost imperceptible sourness, the ghost of 10,000 fermentations, the breath of the yeast that is the very soul of your bread. It smells of history, hard work, and the faint, hopeful aroma of that very yeast, wondering if today's its big day. Spoiler, it is. You step inside, across the slightly raised threshold designed to keep out drifting sand and the occasional adventurous scorpion. The bakery is a single, moderately sized room, its mud brick walls thick and reassuring. You immediately close the door behind you, the thud echoing briefly before the profound silence of the interior reclaims its dominion. Now you are enclosed. Cocooned within your workspace, the outside world temporarily shut away. Your eyes, accustomed to the pre-dawn gloom outside, slowly adjust to the even deeper dimness within. Visibility is what you'd call atmospheric, or, less charitably, you're going to trip over something eventually. There are no windows at eye level, only a few small high openings near the roofline, more like ventilation slits than true windows, designed to let out smoke and some of the intense heat when the oven is firing, while keeping the precious interior relatively shaded from the sun's glare. Through these, only the faintest, most ethereal grey light currently filters, doing little to dispel the shadows that cling to the corners and lurk beneath the rustic benches. As shapes begin to resolve themselves from the gloom, the familiar layout of your domain emerges. Dominating one side of the room is the great beehive oven, a massive clay structure, its rounded form like a sleeping giant. Its mouth, a dark, arched opening, is currently cold and silent, a stark contrast to the roaring fiery heart it will become later. A faint drift of fine grey ash dusts the floor before it, a reminder of yesterday's heat. You can almost feel the residual warmth it once held, now just a memory in the cool air. Nearby, leaning against the wall, are the tools of its service. Long wooden peels for sliding loaves in and out, a sturdy poker for managing embers, and a rough bundle of dried reeds or brushwood that might serve as kindling. Opposite the oven is the grinding station. Here, several saddle querns, large, slightly concave slabs of limestone or granite, sit directly on the earth floor or upon low mud brick plinths. Beside each quern lies its corresponding rubbing stone, a smaller, loaf-shaped stone, waiting for the human effort that will bring them together in their dusty, rhythmic dance of transformation. This area is perpetually coated in a fine film of flour, a pale, ghostly shroud over everything. It's a testament to the most laborious part of your day, a task that demands strength and endurance. Centrally located is the kneading trough. It's a large, heavy pottery basin, its interior worn smooth and almost polished by years of dough being worked against its curved sides. Or perhaps yours is a sturdy wooden one, its timbers darkened and seasoned by flour and moisture. Whatever its material, it's another key altar in your daily rituals, the place where mere flour and water are coaxed into living, breathing dough. Along one wall, rough wooden shelves, or perhaps just niches carved into the mud brick itself, hold your essential supplies. Clay jars of various sizes, stoppered with wooden lids or wads of papyrus, contain the precious emmer wheat and barley grains, your primary ingredients. Another larger jar holds water, hauled from the village well, or a designated clean spot in the Nile. Smaller pots might contain sweeteners like dried dates, figs, or a little pot of prized honey, reserved for special occasion breads or offerings. You might even have a small stash of salt, a valuable commodity. Your collection of pottery bowls, some chipped, some sporting ancient hairline cracks, all of them vintage chic before it was a thing, are stacked neatly, ready for use. Baskets of woven reeds, used for proofing dough or carrying finished. Loaves hang from wooden pegs or sit on the higher shelves. The silence in here is different from the silence outside. The outdoor silence was filled with the subtle hum of the natural world. Here the silence is more absolute, more enclosed. It's the silence of a space waiting. It isn't just quiet. It's professionally quiet. It's been practicing. Your own sounds become startlingly prominent. The soft scuff of your bare feet on the dusty earth floor. The whisper of your linen kilt as you move. The sound of your own breathing, slow and steady in the cool air. Every small movement, every tiny sound, is amplified, then absorbed by the thick walls and the soft layer of flour dust that seems to damp everything. Your first act is usually to unblock one of the higher ventilation slits, perhaps by removing a bundle of reeds stuffed into it, to allow a little more of the growing pre-dawn light to enter and to encourage some air circulation. A thin, pale finger of gray light now pierces the gloom, illuminating a small patch of the opposite wall and making the airborne dust motes dance like tiny, silent spirits. It's not much, but it's enough to navigate by without relying solely on memory. Next, you move towards a particular small lidded pot tucked away in a relatively cool corner. This is your most precious possession, the heart of your bakery, the sourdough starter. The ancient Egyptians were masters of fermentation, and this living culture of wild yeasts and bacteria is the leaven for all your bread. Its vitality is crucial. You approach the pot like it's a temperamental minor deity. Please be bubbly. Please be bubbly. You might internally whisper, or perhaps you offer it a silent, respectful nod. It's your tiny, yeasty overlord. Lifting the lid, you peer inside, sniffing cautiously. A good, tangy aroma, and perhaps a few bubbles on the surface mean it's healthy and ready to work its magic. A flat, lifeless appearance, or a foul smell, would spell trouble. Today, thankfully, it seems content, offering up a gentle, vinegary sigh. This small-scale bakery, your own personal enterprise, is typical of many village operations. While grand temples and the estates of nobles often boasted much larger, almost industrial-scale bakeries with teams of workers producing vast quantities of bread, your setup is more intimate. It serves your immediate community. Historians know that bread was the absolute staple of the Egyptian diet, for rich and poor alike, and baking was a vital, ubiquitous skill. Interestingly, they even included beautifully detailed model bakeries in tombs, tiny, perfect replicas showing little figures grinding grain, kneading dough, and tending ovens, believing these would magically provide sustenance for the deceased in the afterlife. It's a rather charming, if slightly morbid, testament to just how central bread was to their entire conception of life and death. You stand for a moment in the center of the bakery, letting your senses fully absorb the atmosphere, your mind running through the sequence of tasks ahead. There's a comfortable familiarity to it all. This space, with its specific smells and sounds, its particular quality of light and shadow, is an extension of yourself. You know every crack in the wall, every uneven patch on the floor. It's a place of toil, certainly, but also a place of creation, of quiet satisfaction. Egyptologists continue to debate the precise economic status of artisans like bakers in village communities. Were they independent entrepreneurs, taking their own risks and reaping their own rewards? Were they tied to a local headman or temple, working for rations or a share of the produce? Or was it, as with so many things in ancient life, a more complex arrangement somewhere in between, perhaps varying from village to village, era to era? For you in this moment, the concerns are more immediate. The grain needs grinding, the dough needs making, the oven needs firing. The bakery is still cold, holding the chill of the night. Your breath might even mist slightly in the air. But soon, this space will transform. The rhythmic scraping of the grinding stones, the thudding of dough, the crackle and roar of the fire, and finally, the incredible life-affirming aroma of baking bread will chase away the silence and the chill, but not yet. For now, it is a space of quiet potential, held in suspension between the rest of the night and the work of the day. You take a deep, centering breath, the cool, flowery air filling your lungs. The silent bakery awaits your command, your energy, your skill, and you are ready to provide it. The first true labor, the grinding of the grain, looms. The decision settles within you, a silent shift from contemplation to action. The bakery, still wrapped in its cool, dim embrace, waits no longer. It's time to awaken its purpose, and that awakening begins with the fundamental act of transforming hard, unyielding grain into the fine, soft promise of flour. You turn towards the sturdy clay jars that line one of the walls, their rounded forms silhouetted against the faint light. You select your emmer wheat like a connoisseur choosing fine wine, if fine wine came in dusty sacks and required several hours of back-breaking labor before consumption. Reaching into one of the larger jars, your hand sinks into the cool, smooth kernels. Emmer, with its distinctive reddish-brown hue and elongated grains, has been the backbone of Egyptian bread, and indeed much of its beer, for longer than anyone can remember. It's a hardy crop, well suited to the fertile banks of the Nile, and its nutty, slightly earthy flavor is the taste of home. You scoop out a generous portion into a wide, shallow pottery bowl, enough for the morning's initial baking. The tea kernels make a dry, whispering rustle as they cascade into the bowl, a sound like secrets being shared by the earth itself. Carrying the bowl of precious grain, you move to the grinding station. Here, the saddle querns await, their worn limestone surfaces gleaming faintly in the dim light. You choose your preferred quern, one whose slight dips and curves are as familiar to your hands as the lines on your own palms. You run your hand over its surface, brushing away any lingering dust from yesterday's efforts. Then, you place the heavy, loaf-shaped rubbing stone beside it. These stones are your primary tools for this task, ancient technology unchanged for centuries. Now, you settle into the traditional grinding position, a delightful blend of deep prayer and preparing for a particularly stubborn wrestling match, with breakfast. This usually means kneeling before the quern, your body braced, ready to use your weight and strength to crush the grain. Some bakers might have a small reed mat to kneel on for a sliver more comfort, but often it's just the cool, packed earth beneath your knees. You take a handful of emmer kernels from the bowl and scatter them onto the near end of the quern. Taking the rubbing stone in both hands, you position it over the grains, a deep breath, and then you begin. The first push is always the hardest, overcoming the inertia of the stone and the resistance of the whole intact kernels. There's a distinct crunching, grating sound as the grains are caught between the two stones. You push the rubbing stone forward, away from your body, leaning into it, then pull it back, your movements dictated by the long, slightly concave shape of the quern. Forward and back, forward and back. The sound isn't exactly chart-topping music, more like a geological argument between two very stubborn stones. But it's the soundtrack to your morning, a rhythmic, abrasive song that will continue for a considerable time. Initially, the product is coarse, a roughly broken meal with many still large pieces of grain and husk. This is just the first skirmish in the battle for flour. As you work, a fine dust begins to rise, catching the faint light beams and creating a hazy aura around you. Flour dust fills the air, giving you that artisan baker look, which is a polite way of saying you're covered in fine powder and will be tasting wheat for hours. It settles on your arms, your face, your kilt, a pale uniform of your profession. The air becomes thick with the dry, slightly sweet scent of freshly crushed emmer, a distinct and not unpleasant aroma, but one that can become cloying after a while. Your shoulders and back muscles quickly begin to protest. This is not gentle work. It requires sustained effort, a continuous rocking motion, using your core strength to apply pressure. Your arms ache, your wrists strain. Sweat begins to prickle on your forehead and run in small rivulets down your temples, tracing paths through the accumulating flour dust. Your shoulders are already composing a strongly worded letter of complaint to management. which is also you. Awkward. But you fall into the rhythm, your mind either focusing intently on the task, ensuring an even grind, or drifting into that quiet, meditative state that repetitive physical labor can induce. After the initial breaking of the grain, you gather the coarse meal into your bowl. Now, the process of refining begins. You pour a smaller amount of the meal back onto the quern and start again, this time perhaps with a slightly different pressure or a more nuanced movement of the rubbing stone, aiming for a finer consistency. This will be repeated multiple times. True, fine flour is not achieved in a single pass. It's a patient, iterative process. Between grindings, you might use a simple sieve, perhaps a piece of woven palm fiber, or a loosely woven linen cloth stretched over a wooden hoop, to separate the finer particles from the coarser bran and any remaining unground pieces. What passes through the sieve is collected carefully. What remains is often tipped back onto the quern for another round of persuasion from the rubbing stone. Archaeobotanists and food historians continue to discuss the exact range of particle sizes ancient Egyptians preferred or could realistically achieve for their flour using these methods, and how this impacted the texture, density, and even the digestibility of their daily bread. Was the ideal a superfine powder, or did they accept, or even prefer, a slightly grittier, more rustic texture? The evidence is, much like your current product, a bit coarse in places. One thing is certain: no matter how carefully you grind and sieve, tiny particles of grit from the stones themselves inevitably become incorporated into the flour. This wasn't an optional artisanal addition, it was an unavoidable consequence of the technology. This naturally stone-ground flour comes with a free, unintended dental plan, mostly involving wearing your teeth down to nubs. Examination of V. Ancient Egyptian mummies and skeletons consistently reveals significant abrasion on their teeth, a direct result of a lifetime diet of bread made with stone-ground flour. So, as you toil away, creating the very staff of life, you're also inadvertently contributing to the dental woes of your customers. Smile, though perhaps not too widely if you want to keep those teeth for a while. The minutes stretch into what feels like an hour, then perhaps longer. The pile of grain in your bowl diminishes, while the precious mound of off-white, slightly gritty flour slowly grows. The bakery is no longer silent. It's filled with the rhythmic scrape and grind, your steady breathing, the occasional sigh of effort. The light filtering in from the high vents has strengthened, shifting from pale gray to a milky white, indicating that the sun is now above the horizon, though its direct rays do not yet penetrate your workspace. You pause occasionally to wipe the sweat from your brow with the back of a dusty hand, to stretch your aching shoulders, to take a sip of water from the clay cup you wisely brought to your station. The physical toll is undeniable. This is where the quiet life meets sheer hard graft. There's no machinery to ease the burden, no shortcuts, just your own muscle power, patience, and the ancient, unyielding stones. Yet there's also a profound satisfaction in this elemental task. You are taking the raw gift of the earth, the sun-ripened kernels of emmer, and through your own labor, transforming it into something that will nourish your community. Each handful of flour produced is a small victory, a testament to your skill and perseverance. The world outside might be waking up now, the sounds of the village slowly beginning to filter in. A distant dog barking, the call of a vendor, the laughter of children. But here, in your flour-dusted realm, you are locked in this timeless, essential process. Finally, the last handful of grain has been worked through the quern multiple times. The bowl of kernels is empty. Beside it, a respectable mound of emmer. Flour awaits, its texture still not as uniformly fine as modern flours, but as good as you can make it with the tools at hand. It's warm to the touch from the friction of the grinding. You carefully gather every last particle of flour from the quern and the surrounding area, brushing it into your collection bowl. Nothing is wasted. This precious commodity is the result of too much effort to lose even a pinch. You sit back on your heels for a moment, the rubbing stone resting on the quern. Your arms tremble slightly with fatigue. Your back aches. You are coated in a fine layer of dust. But the first great labor of the day is complete. The grain has undergone its trial by stone, and you, its willing instrument, have brought forth the foundation of today's bread. You rise from your kneeling position beside the saddle quern, your legs stiff, your back singing a familiar tune of protest. The air around you is still thick with the fine, warm dust of newly ground emmer flour. You attempt to dust yourself off, clapping your hands together, shaking out your kilt, achieving mostly a redistribution of flour from your arms to your face. Peak baker chic, you suppose, if that were a concept anyone here had ever considered. A quick wipe of your brow with a forearm already coated in a pale film of wheat, and you're ready for the next act in this daily drama of dough. The precious bowl of flour, still radiating a faint warmth from the friction of its creation, is carefully lifted. Its scent is earthy and wholesome, the very essence of sustenance. You carry it reverently towards the large kneading trough that occupies a central space in the bakery. This trough, whether it's a substantial, wide-mouthed pottery vessel or one crafted from thick, well-worn wooden planks, is where the true alchemy will begin. It's time to introduce Mr. Flour to Ms. Water and their eccentric, bubbly friend, Professor Sourdough Starter. It's often a messy blind date at first, but you're the patient matchmaker, hoping for a lasting, elastic relationship. First, you ensure the trough is clean, perhaps giving it a quick wipe with a dry cloth to remove any stray particles from yesterday's endeavors. Then, with a practiced hand, you might scatter a whisper-thin layer of flour across its concave bottom, a delicate preparation to discourage the initial stickiness of the dough to come. You pour the bulk of your freshly ground emmer flour into the trough, creating a soft, pale mound. With your hands, you form a depression in its center, a volcanic crater awaiting its liquid core. Next, you fetch the water jar. The water is cool, drawn earlier from the village well, or a clean, slow-moving part of a nearby canal. You pour a measured amount into the well in the flour. There's a soft sigh as the water meets the dry particles, a thirst being quenched. The scent of wet flour begins to rise, different from the dry dust, heavier, more cloying, almost like damp earth. Then comes the most vital ingredient after the flour and water, the leaven. You retrieve the small lidded pot containing your sourdough starter, the one you checked earlier. Lifting the lid again, you're greeted by its distinctively tangy, slightly alcoholic aroma, the perfume of active fermentation. It's a lively, bubbling concoction of wild yeasts and bacteria, a living legacy passed down, perhaps, through generations of bakers, or one you've carefully cultivated yourself from the natural yeasts present on the grain and in the air. Ancient Egyptians didn't have neat little packets of commercial yeast. Their skill lay in capturing and maintaining these natural leavens, a testament to their deep understanding of natural processes. This starter is the life force of your bread. You scoop a generous portion of this frothy, slightly viscous starter into the trough with the flour and water. Now the real work of your hands begins. You plunge them into the mixture. Initially, it's a chaotic mess. The flour resists the water, forming dry clumps. The starter adds a slippery, almost slimy texture. It's cold, wet, and thoroughly unpromising. The initial combination of flour and water, with the starter just beginning to mingle, looks less like proto-bread, and more like something a disgruntled earth elemental might have coughed up after a particularly trying day. Trust the process. You tell yourself, as you always do. You begin to mix, to incorporate. Your fingers work through the mass, breaking up the dry pockets of flour, encouraging everything to combine. The sounds are wet and sloppy, squishing, slapping, the soft sucking noise as you pull your hands free from the clinging mass. It's a messy, sticky stage, and soon your hands and forearms are coated in a thick, pasty glove of embryonic dough. You consider, for a fleeting moment, starting a new trend. Dough hand chic. It probably won't catch on, not even at the local Hippo Goddess Appreciation Festival. Once a shaggy, incoherent mass is formed, the kneading proper commences. This is where strength, endurance, and skill truly intersect. Kneading. The ancient art of persuading a sticky, uncooperative blob that it really, really wants to be bread. It involves a lot of leaning your body weight into each push, some rhythmic grunting that you're barely aware of, and occasionally questioning your life choices, especially when a particularly stubborn patch of dough seems determined to adhere permanently to the side of the trough or your left elbow. You develop a rhythm. Push the dough away from you with the heels of your hands, then fold it over on itself, give it a quarter turn, and push again. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. Over and over. The trough, whether pottery or wood, provides a firm, curved surface to work against. The dough thuds heavily with each push. Your muscles, already warmed up from the grinding, now engage in a different kind of labor. Your shoulders, arms, and back work in concert. Sweat, which had briefly subsided, begins to bead on your forehead again. This is no delicate pastry work. Emmer flour, with its lower gluten content compared to modern bread wheats, requires thorough but careful handling. You're not aiming for the same kind of window pane elasticity a modern baker might seek with high-protein flour. But you still need to develop what structure you can to trap the gases the yeast will produce, to give the bread some substance. Food historians and experimental archaeologists still debate the typical hydration levels of ancient Egyptian doughs and the specific kneading techniques that might have been favored to develop an optimal crumb structure with emmer. Did they use long, slow kneading or shorter, more intensive periods? Were their doughs generally wetter or stiffer? The reliefs and models show the action, but not the minute details of the recipe. Slowly, miraculously, the dough begins to change under your hands. The initial stickiness starts to subside. The shaggy, rough texture begins to smooth out. It becomes more cohesive, less like a collection of disparate ingredients and more like a single, unified entity. You can feel the subtle shift as the proteins in the flour hydrate and begin to form a network. It's still a workout, but there's a growing responsiveness from the dough. a sense that it's yielding to your efforts, collaborating with you. The sounds change too, from wet slaps to more muted, doughy thuds. The aroma matures, the raw flour smell mellowing, the tang of the starter becoming more integrated. You might pause to scrape down the sides of the trough with a wooden paddle or a curved piece of pottery, gathering any stray bits back into the main mass. You adjust your stance, finding a more comfortable rhythm, while you, as a solitary baker in this small establishment, knead by hand. It's interesting to recall that some ancient Egyptian tomb depictions and models show much larger operations, where multiple people, sometimes even using their feet, would work together in enormous troughs to knead vast quantities of dough, likely for temple offerings or large workforces. It's a rather striking image, that communal, almost industrial-scale foot-stomping for bread, a far cry from your quiet, focused manual labor here. The process is long, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, perhaps even longer, depending on the quantity of dough and the ambient temperature. There's no clock on the wall, only your internal sense, honed by years of experience, that tells you when it's approaching readiness. You feel for the subtle cues, the smoothness of the surface, the way it pushes back gently when prodded, its willingness to hold a shape. And then it happens. The dough finally transforms from a rebellious, sticky teenager into a smooth, compliant, almost silken being. It's still a little tacky, perhaps, but it no longer clings desperately to your hands. It has a pleasing weight, a satisfying plumpness. It's a small miracle, or just a lot of gluten development and hydration. Same difference. Really, when you're this deep into the process, you have coaxed it into existence. You gather the dough into a rough ball. It's warm now, partly from the friction of your labor and partly from the ambient warmth of your own body. It feels alive, imbued with the potential for growth, for transformation. This is no longer just flour and water. It's dough, pregnant, with the promise of bread. With gentle, practiced hands, you lift the mass from the trough. You might give it a final, brief shaping on a lightly floured patch of your workbench, or a clean reed mat. Then, you place it carefully into a large, clean pottery bowl or a woven basket, perhaps one lined with a flowered linen cloth to prevent sticking. You might cover it with another cloth or an inverted bowl to protect it from drafts and drying out. Now, the dough needs to rest, to proof. The wild yeasts from your starter, now happily embedded in their starchy new home, will begin their work in earnest, feasting on the sugars in the flour and producing the carbon dioxide that will make the dough rise, giving it lightness and texture. This first fermentation is a quiet, invisible process, but utterly essential. You step back from the resting dough, a sense of accomplishment washing over you, mingled with the familiar fatigue. The second great labor of the morning is complete. The flour has been tamed, the water embraced, the leaven introduced. The dough has taken its first true breath under your expert guidance and now sleeps, dreaming of the fire to come. With the dough now peacefully resting, beginning its slow, magical transformation, your attention shifts to the other monumental presence in your bakery, the great clay oven. It stands in the corner, a hulking, beehive-shaped dome, currently as cold and welcoming as a tax collector's smile. Its dark, arched mouth seems to hold the chill of the night deep within its clay belly. This dormant giant is the next challenge, the next essential element you must awaken and skillfully manage. It's time for taming the fire god. Your first task is to ensure it's ready for a new blaze. If yesterday's baking left a significant bed of cold ashes, you might take a simple wooden rake or a flat piece of repurposed pottery to draw them out, clearing the oven floor for a fresh fire. These ashes, rich in potash, are not wasted. They might be used to enrich the small vegetable patch behind your dwelling, or mixed with clay for other purposes. Today, however, the oven floor seems relatively clear. Perhaps you were meticulous in your cleanup yesterday. A good omen, maybe. Next, you turn to your fuel supply. This isn't a neat stack of perfectly seasoned oak logs. Your fuel is a more humble, practical collection, likely stored in a dry corner of the bakery or a small sheltered lean-to outside. It's a delightful medley of what the local environment provides: dried animal dung, particularly from cattle, or donkeys, which burns surprisingly hot and long once properly dried, is a common and effective fuel. Mixed with this might be bundles of dried reeds from the riverbank, woody stems from pruned bushes, palm fronds, or even chaff and straw left over from grain processing. It's all very organic, very resourceful. You select a good armful of the coarser dung cakes and some bundles of faster-burning reeds for kindling, their dry, earthy scent filling the air as you carry them to the oven. You approach the oven's dark maw. Crouching down, you begin to lay the fire. This isn't just a haphazard pile. There's an art to it, ensuring good airflow so the fire can breathe and catch properly. You might start with a small nest of the driest, finest tinder, perhaps some frayed papyrus scraps or dried grass. Then carefully arrange the kindling, the reeds and smaller twigs, around and above it. Finally, the larger pieces of dung or wood are placed strategically, ready to catch once the kindling is well alight. Now, to bring forth the spark. You don't have a handy box of matches or a modern lighter. You might use embers carefully preserved from a communal village fire, carried in a small, lidded pottery jar. Or perhaps you rely on the ancient and rather laborious technique of a fire drill. A wooden spindle rapidly rotated in a notch on a fireboard until friction creates a glowing ember, more likely for daily use, if no communal embers are available, is the use of flint and a spark-producing mineral like pyrite, striking them together to shower sparks onto your tinder. You coax the first flames into existence. It's like trying to convince a very sleepy badger to go for a jog requires patience and a bit of trickery. A tiny spark catches, smolders, and then, with a gentle breath from you, blossoms into a small, hesitant flame. You nurture this infant fire carefully, adding tiny pieces of kindling, shielding it from any drafts, whispering encouragement to it, or perhaps that's just your imagination. Slowly the flames take hold, licking at the reeds, crackling softly. The first wisps of smoke begin to curl upwards from the oven's mouth, thin and grey. Initially, the smoke is thick and opinionated, expressing its displeasure at being woken up, carrying a pungent, acrid smell as the initial fuel smolders rather than burns cleanly. You give it a stern look, not that it cares. It mostly ignores you, billowing out into the bakery before hopefully finding its way up and out through the high ventilation slits near the roof. As the kindling catches properly, you begin to add larger pieces of fuel, the dried dung cakes, the sturdier branches. The crackling intensifies, the flames grow bolder, taller, more confident. They dance and writhe within the confines of the oven dome, their orange and yellow light pushing back the dimness, casting flickering, dramatic shadows across the bakery walls. The oven is waking up, its cold heart slowly warming. The ancient Egyptians understood the power of fire intimately. It was a tool, a comfort, a destructive force, and often personified as a deity or a powerful spirit. Your relationship with it today is one of careful mastery. Tending the fire is an ongoing process. You can't just light it and walk away. The thick clay walls of these traditional beehive ovens need to absorb a tremendous amount of heat to bake efficiently. You periodically add more fuel, judging the needs of the fire by its roar, the color of its flames, the amount of smoke it produces. A clean, hot fire with bright yellow or almost white flames and minimal smoke is the goal. You might use your long wooden poker to shift the burning fuel around, ensuring an even distribution of heat throughout the oven chamber. The heat radiating from the oven's mouth soon becomes intense enough to toast your eyebrows if you lean in too close for a chat. Personal space, fire. Personal space is definitely a concept you'd like the fire to respect. The air in the bakery changes. The initial chill is long gone, replaced by a growing, pervasive warmth. The smell of acrid smoke gives way to the drier, cleaner scent of burning wood or dung. The sound of the fire is a constant, hungry roar, a stark contrast to the earlier silence. The historical ovens of this type, often called Tanner or similar, were marvels of simple design, their domed shape helping to reflect heat evenly. Once thoroughly heated, the embers would be raked out or pushed to the side, and the bread would bake in the stored heat radiating from the glowing hot clay walls and floor. No thermostats, no precise temperature gauges, just the baker's accumulated knowledge. You observe the inner walls of the oven. When you first lit the fire, they were dark, perhaps coated in a layer of black soot. As the oven heats, this soot begins to burn off. The walls start to glow, first a dull red, then brighter, until they are almost white hot. This change in the color of the oven's interior is one of your key indicators that it's approaching the correct baking temperature. The immense heat is almost palpable now, a physical presence in the room. You can feel it on your face, your arms, even through your linen kilt when you get close. It's a testament to the ingenuity of ancient peoples that they developed such effective baking technology. While the design was simple, the understanding of heat dynamics was clearly sophisticated. Researchers engaged in experimental archaeology today build and fire replicas of these ancient ovens, meticulously recording firing times, fuel consumption, and temperature curves. They still debate the exact fuel efficiency of different designs and the optimal methods for achieving consistent baking temperatures, trying to unlock the secrets of your long-lost colleagues. You, however, operate on instinct and experience. You're basically an oven whisperer, listening to its crackles, observing its fiery breath, and feeling its radiating power to know when it's in the mood for bread. Some bakers, in times past or even now in hushed whispers, might have employed small oven charms or muttered specific incantations to ensure a good bake, to appease the spirit of the fire, or protect the oven from cracking or collapsing. A misbehaving oven could spell disaster, wasted fuel, wasted dough, hungry customers. While you might not consciously engage in such overt magic, there's certainly a deep respect, almost a reverence, for the powerful forces at play. This fire god within your clay dome demands careful handling. The intense heat continues to build. The entire structure of the oven is now saturated with it. The outside of the clay dome, initially cool to the touch, is now radiating a formidable warmth, contributing to the rising temperature of the entire bakery. This stored heat is crucial. It's what will bake the bread evenly, long after the main blaze has subsided. After what feels like a significant passage of time, perhaps an hour or more of diligent fire tending, you decide the oven is ready. The flames are burning cleanly. The inner walls are glowing with an intense, even heat, and the air shimmering above the oven mouth is almost unbearable to approach too closely. The fire god has been well fed, its belly full of roaring flames, and the clay shell of the oven has absorbed its fiery energy. The task of taming is not quite over, but the initial wild heating phase is complete. Soon you will manage these embers, preparing the oven bed for the first loaves. For now you step back, feeling the sweat on your skin, the flush of heat on your face. The bakery is no longer a cool, dim sanctuary. It's a hot, vibrant workshop, dominated by the radiant power of the awakened oven. The great clay oven, now a pulsating heart of incandescence, stands ready. The wild, roaring inferno you so diligently built has saturated its thick walls with immense heat. Now you must transition this raw power into a controlled baking environment. You take your long-handled wooden rake and carefully, skillfully, begin to manage the glowing embers. Some bakers might draw all the embers out, relying solely on the retained heat in the oven's structure. Others, perhaps for particular types of bread or longer bakes, might rake the glowing coals to one side, creating a more direct, though still moderated heat source. Today, you opt to sweep the majority of the embers and ash out onto a designated patch of bare earth outside the bakery door, where they can cool safely, leaving the oven floor clean and fiercely hot. You play a fiery game of shuffleboard with the remaining embers, coaxing them to the very back or sides, ensuring the main baking surface is clear. The oven floor needs to be glowing hot but not actively incinerating. It's a fine line, a baker's judgment call. A quick test, perhaps by tossing in a pinch of flour and watching how quickly it scorches to black, confirms the heat is still formidable. With the oven patiently waiting, radiating an almost visible shimmer of heat, you turn your attention to the dough. It has been resting quietly in its bowl or basket, covered, while you wrestled with the fire god. Lifting the cloth, you behold its transformation. The dough has risen beautifully, nearly doubled in size, its surface smooth and gently domed, looking like a very content, puffy cloud that's contemplating a successful career in carbohydrates. The subtle, yeasty aroma is more pronounced now, sweet and tangy. Gently, you tip the proofed dough out onto your lightly floured work surface, perhaps a smooth, worn wooden board or a dedicated section of a sturdy bench. There's a soft, sighing sound as the air within it compresses. You don't punch it down aggressively. Emmer dough can be a bit more delicate than its modern wheat counterparts. Instead, you gently deflate it, pressing out the larger air bubbles, preparing it for shaping. Now, you divide and shape the dough into loaves. Ancient Egyptians baked a fascinating variety of breads. Some were simple, round, flat loaves, perfect for tearing and dipping. Others were baked in special conical pottery molds that were preheated in the oven, resulting in distinctively shaped bread, often depicted in offering scenes. There were also triangular loaves, oval ones, even breads, shaped like animals or human figures for special religious occasions. Today, your repertoire is likely focused on the daily staples, sturdy, round loaves, perhaps some flatter discs. You work with practiced hands, coaxing the somewhat sticky emmer dough into the desired forms. Emmer flour, being lower in the type, of gluten that gives modern bread its dramatic structure, produces a denser, though no less delicious product. You might roll some pieces into balls, then flatten them slightly, or perhaps you press them into shallow, floured baskets that will lend a pleasing pattern to the crust as they undergo a brief final proof before baking. The shaped loaves, now, looking like pale, expectant proto-breads, are arranged on your long wooden peel, which you've dusted with a little coarse flour or bran to help them slide off smoothly. This is it, the moment of commitment. You approach the oven's mouth. The wave of heat that washes over you is intense, a dry, scorching blast that makes you squint and hold your breath for a moment. Working quickly but without panic, you extend the peel deep into the glowing heart of the oven. With a deft flick of your wrists, a movement honed by countless repetitions, you slide the loaves one by one onto the hot, clean oven floor. Sliding the loaves in is like sending your brave little dough soldiers into the fiery belly of the beast. You wish them luck and try not to singe your nose hairs or what remains of them after years of this. Once the oven is loaded with this first precious batch, you quickly withdraw the peel and might even partially cover the oven mouth with a flat stone or a piece of damp sacking to retain as much steam and heat as possible, though some oven designs had more formal doors. Now begins the tense vigil of baking. There are no glass windows to peer through, no timers to set. You rely on experience, on the subtle cues of smell, and perhaps after a while, a quick, brave peek inside. The heat within the oven is tremendous. The loaves, hitting that searing surface, begin to transform almost immediately. You can imagine the oven spring, that final burst of rising as the yeasts have one last party before the heat deactivates them. The moisture in the dough turns to steam, helping the loaf expand and forming that coveted crust. The aroma that begins to fill the bakery is transformative. It starts as a warm, yeasty fragrance, then deepens, sweetens, caramelizes. It's a scent so fundamentally comforting, so deeply reassuring, it could probably negotiate peace treaties between warring kingdoms, or at the very least, get you an extra fig from your spouse at lunchtime. It's the smell of civilization itself, some might say. This rich, nutty, slightly sweet perfume of baking emmer bread is a perfume that has filled Egyptian homes and bakeries for millennia. During the bake, you remain attentive. The exact range of temperatures achieved in these ancient ovens, and the typical baking times for different types of loaves, are still subjects of considerable discussion and experimental archaeology. Researchers try to replicate these conditions to understand the science behind your art, but for you, it's an ingrained sense. Too short, and the inside will be dense and gummy. Too long, and you'll have a collection of inedible, carbonized bricks. You might listen for subtle sounds, a faint sizzling perhaps. You watch the quality of any steam escaping the oven. After a period you deem appropriate, you might take your peel and, with extreme care, quickly rotate the loaves if you know your oven has hotter spots, or even briefly draw one out for inspection. Then, the moment arrives when your instincts tell you they are ready. You take up the peel again, Brace yourself against the heat and approach the oven. One by one, you skillfully scoop the loaves from the fiery depths, and what emerges is pure, rustic magic. The loaves are no longer pale and doughy. They are transformed into beautiful shades of golden brown, some perhaps a deeper chestnut hue, where they caught more direct heat. Their surfaces are rugged, beautifully imperfect, perhaps dusted with a fine layer of ash that you'll brush off later, a hallmark of half-baked bread. The crust is visibly crisp, with small cracks and fissures that whisper of the textures within. You slide them from the peel onto a waiting cooling rack, perhaps a simple construction of woven reeds or a clean dry spot on a wooden bench. And then you hear it, the song of the bread. As the intensely hot loaves meet the cooler air of the bakery, their crusts begin to contract, producing a symphony of tiny, distinct crackles and snaps. It's a delightful, subtle music, a sure sign of a good crust and a successful bake. The aroma is now at its peak, an intoxicating cloud of caramelized sugars, toasted grain, and yeasty warmth that fills every corner of the bakery and probably drifts out to tantalize the awakening village. This is the smell of success, the culmination of all your morning's labors, the grinding, the mixing, the kneading, the fire tending. Behold, golden brown perfection. Or, well, ancient Egyptian rustic perfection. They won't win any modern Instagram beauty pageants with their perfectly symmetrical crumb, but they are honest, hearty, and they smell like absolute victory. Each loaf is heavy, substantial. You might pick one up, protecting your hand with a cloth, and tap its bottom. It should sound hollow, like it's echoing all the profound secrets of the universe, or at least confirming it's not a doughy brick that could be used for nefarious construction purposes. This first batch of fragrant, crackling loaves marks the day's initial, crucial success. It's a moment of profound satisfaction, a quiet joy that only a baker, or anyone who creates something tangible with their own hands, can truly understand. It's worth remembering, as you gaze upon these humble loaves, that bread like this
was more than just food in ancient Egypt. It was a fundamental unit of sustenance, so vital that it was often used as a form of wages. The workers who built the Great Pyramids, for instance, received daily rations of bread and beer.
Your craft feeds not just bellies, but the very engine of society. You allow yourself a small internal smile. The fire god has been tamed, the dough has surrendered its potential, and the oven has yielded its golden bounty. The day is still young, and there will be more batches to bake. But this first triumph sets a positive rhythm for all that is to follow. The last echoes of the crackling crust from that first glorious batch of bread have faded into the warm, fragrant air of your bakery. Perhaps another set of loaves is already nestled within the oven's glowing heart, undergoing its fiery transformation. Or maybe a fresh mound of dough is taking its first leisurely rise in a flowered basket. For a short while at least, the most demanding physical exertions have subsided. The oven, now a steadily radiating source of immense heat, hums its silent, powerful tune. The bakery is saturated with the almost unbearably delicious scent of freshly baked emmer bread, a testament to your morning's considerable labors. It's in this momentary lull, this pocket of relative calm, that your body reminds you of its own needs. Your stomach, having been tantalized by the divine aroma for what seems like an eternity, is now staging a rather vocal protest, a series of gurgles and rumbles that make some fair points about the importance of quality control, preferably internally and immediately. The initial adrenaline of the first bake has waned, and a familiar weariness settles into your limbs. Your back, despite its years of conditioning, still aches from the grinding and kneading. It's time for a baker's quiet repast. You don't have a designated break room or a canteen. Your meal will be taken here, amidst the tools of your trade, in the warm, flower-dusted sanctuary you command. You move to a small, shadowed alcove where you keep your personal provisions. Your gourmet breakfast, or perhaps by now it's closer to a mid-morning refuel, is characteristically simple. You might unwrap a piece of bread from yesterday's baking. The fresh, hot loaves are too precious, and honestly, often for customers, or specific orders first. Yesterday's bread, a little chewier, a little more settled in its flavor, is perfectly good for you. Alongside it, perhaps a handful of dried dates, their sugary sweetness a welcome burst of energy. Or maybe a few pungent crisp radishes or a raw onion, surprisingly common and enjoyed staples in the ancient Egyptian diet. The diet of an ordinary Egyptian like yourself was largely based on this holy trinity of bread, beer, and a generous helping of vegetables like onions, garlic, and legumes. Meat was a rarer treat. Fish more common if you lived close enough to the Nile or a canal with obliging fish. You find your usual spot, perhaps a low, three-legged wooden stool you crafted yourself, tucked into a corner that catches a little of the oven's warmth but isn't directly in its scorching breath. Or maybe you just lean against a flour sack, or sit on an overturned pottery bowl that's seen better days. The bakery's ambiance is rustic industrial warmth, with a strong hint of eternal toil. It's very niche, very you. You break off a piece of the bread. Its texture is dense and satisfying. The taste is nutty, slightly sour from the emmer and the wild yeasts of your starter. You chew slowly, thoughtfully. Each bite is a reminder of the entire cycle, the grain grown in the black earth, the labor of the harvest, your own painstaking efforts at the quern and the trough. You follow it with a date, its intense sweetness a pleasant contrast. You might have a small clay cup of water, or if you're feeling particularly indulgent, a sip of weak, homemade beer. Egyptian beer was a staple, often thick and nutritious, less an alcoholic indulgence in its common form, and more like slightly confused fizzy bread water. But it's hydrating, and the fermentation adds some valuable nutrients. As you eat, you are lost in the bakery's warm, comforting atmosphere. The most intense heat of the oven doesn't quite reach your little nook, but its gentle, pervasive warmth is like a comforting blanket. The air is thick with the lingering perfume of baked bread, now mingled with the fainter, older scents of flour, yeast, and cool clay. Shafts of slightly stronger daylight now pierce the high ventilation slits, illuminating swirling galaxies of airborne flour dust, each mote catching the light like a tiny, fleeting star. You watch the heat haze shimmering above the oven, a visible manifestation of its immense power. A small, striped gecko, a silent resident of the bakery, might dart across a section of sun-warmed wall, its tiny claws making almost no sound, before vanishing into a crack. Occasionally, a scrawny cat, the bakery's unofficial and entirely self-appointed crumb inspector, might wander in with an air of supreme entitlement. It might give you a look of profound disappointment that you're eating again without offering it the choicest morsels, then find a comfortably warm spot near the oven, but not too near, to curl up for an extended nap, its purr a low thrumming bass note beneath the bakery's quiet. Your thoughts are as unhurried as your meal. You reflect on the profound mysteries of turning simple flour and water into this life-sustaining food. Mostly you reflect on how much your back still hurts and whether that last batch of dough felt quite right. Deep thoughts for a baker. You might idly consider the orders for the day, any special requests, any temple dues that need to be met. Or your mind might simply be empty, a quiet pool reflecting the play of light and shadow on the opposite wall, the rhythmic, almost inaudible hiss of the still hot oven. It's in these quiet, solitary moments that the true nature of your extremely quiet life is most apparent. There are no colleagues to chat with, no bustling crowds outside your door just yet. It's just you, the rhythm of your work, and the ancient elemental forces of grain, water, and fire. The ancient Egyptians, particularly the common folk, were known for their love of garlic and onions. Herodotus, the Greek historian, even famously reported seeing inscriptions detailing the vast quantities of radishes, onions, and garlic consumed by the laborers who built the Great Pyramid, not just for flavor, but supposedly for strength and health. You nibble on your raw onion slice with a new appreciation. Perhaps this is your superpower. The grand pronouncements of the priests in far-off Karnak, the political machinations in the royal court at Memphis or Thebes, the epic tales of gods, and pharaohs, these feel very distant from your warm, fragrant, flowery world. The extent to which individual artisans like yourself truly participated in, or were even acutely aware of, the broader religious and political ideologies of the state is a topic of ongoing discussion among Egyptologists. Some argue for a deeply pervasive worldview that permeated every level of society, while others suggest that for many, life was more about the immediate, pragmatic concerns of hearth, harvest, and appeasing local deities. Your most pressing concern right now is whether that last batch of dough will stick to the peel. This simple meal, this quiet pause, is a vital punctuation mark in your day. It's a moment to recharge, however briefly, before the next cycle of activity begins. The warmth seeps into your tired muscles. The food settles satisfyingly in your stomach. The peace of the bakery, broken only by the soft sounds of your own eating or the gentle sigh of the cooling oven, if it's between firings, is a balm to your spirit. Slowly, you finish your meal. You brush the crumbs from your kilt, take a final sip of water or beer. The weariness hasn't vanished, but it has receded a little. A sense of quiet readiness begins to return. There is more dough to be shaped, more bread to be baked. The village will soon be stirring more fully, and the demand for your fragrant wares will grow. But for this brief, stolen interlude, you were simply a man at rest, finding solace and sustenance in the heart of your warm, comforting, and extraordinarily quiet domain. The fire god slumbers contentedly for now, and so, in a way, have you. The brief respite of your simple meal concludes. The warmth of the bakery, the lingering scent of the first successful batch of bread, and the gentle satisfaction of sustenance have taken the sharpest edges off your fatigue. But the day's work is far from over. The oven still radiates its potent heat, and more dough awaits your skilled attention. Your brief holiday in the land of not actively toiling is over. The dough, much like time and tide, waits for no baker, unless of course it's proofing. Then it waits very patiently, which is quite considerate of it. With a soft sigh, more of contentment than weariness now, you rise and return to the heart of your work. The rhythm of the bakery reasserts itself, a familiar cadence that has structured countless days of your life. It's an unhurried cycle, yes, but a continuous one. The preparation of dough, the careful shaping, the patient proofing, the watchful baking. Each stage flows into the next, a seamless loop of creation. Perhaps you have enough Emma flour ground from your earlier marathon session to last for a few more batches. If so, you move directly to the kneading trough, ready to begin the process anew. If not, a return to the dusty embrace of the saddle quern might be necessary. Though for now, let's imagine you planned ahead, your earlier self doing a favor for your current self. You gather your ingredients, more of that precious flour, water from the cooling jar, and another portion of your ever-reliable, bubbly sourdough starter. The familiar ritual of mixing begins again. The dry flour, the cool water, the tangy leaven, they meet in the trough under your guiding hands. The initial stickiness, the subsequent transformation into a cohesive mass, the rhythmic push, fold and turn of the kneading, it's all profoundly familiar. Your movements are economical, honed by countless repetitions. There's no wasted effort, no hesitation. Your hands know precisely how the dough should feel at each stage. The subtle shifts in texture that indicate the gluten is developing, that the structure is forming. You're basically a well-oiled, slightly flour-dusted baking machine, if machines ran on dates, raw onions, and existential size. While one batch of dough is being kneaded into submission, another, prepared earlier, might have completed its first rise. You uncover it, admiring its puffed-up pride, then gently deflate it and carry it to your shaping area. Perhaps these loaves will be a slightly different form from the first batch. Maybe some smaller rolls, or a few flatter discs suitable for a quick bake. Sometimes you might mix it up, make a slightly flatter loaf, or one that's vaguely triangular. If you're feeling particularly adventurous, it's your quiet way of keeping the carbs exciting. The village probably lives for this level of thrilling diversity in their daily bread. Shaping the dough is a gentler, more precise art than the robust effort of kneading. You coax it into its final form, ensuring a taut surface that will encourage a good rise in the oven and a pleasing crust. These shaped pieces are then set aside for their final proof, perhaps in floured baskets or on cloth-lined trays, covered lightly to prevent a skin from forming. You manage your limited workspace efficiently, a silent choreography of bowls, baskets, and boards. All the while, the oven demands your attention. If a batch is baking, you monitor its progress by smell, by instinct, perhaps by a quick, heat-blasted peek. When it's perfectly golden and crackling, you draw it out with the long peel, the wave of fragrant heat washing over you yet again. The newly baked loaves join their predecessors on the cooling racks, their combined aroma creating an almost overwhelmingly delicious atmosphere in the bakery. Then, the oven, still fiercely hot, is ready for its next load. Managing dough proofing, oven temperatures and baking times simultaneously is like conducting a very slow, very hot orchestra where all the musicians are made of gluten and the conductor occasionally has to wipe soot off his nose. This cycle, mix, knead, proof, shape, proof again, bake, repeats itself throughout the morning and into the main part of the day. Each movement, each judgment, is a product of years of practice. Your hands know what to do, even if your brain is half asleep and dreaming of a world without endless kneading. It's called expert mode, or possibly auto-baker pilot. You adjust your techniques subtly based on the feel of the dough, the temperature of the bakery, which steadily rises as the oven continues to burn. Even the humidity in the air, though, you wouldn't articulate it in such scientific terms. It's just a knowing. Bread and beer, these were the twin pillars of the ancient Egyptian diet, and indeed, their economy. Often produced in close conjunction, sometimes even in the same estates or temple workshops, they represented the fundamental processing of the land's bounty of cereal grains. Your daily toil, this constant production of bread, is therefore not just a craft, but a cornerstone of life around you. While you might not be brewing the accompanying beer today, the centrality of your work is undeniable. You might reflect, as you shape a particularly nice round loaf, on the sheer variety of breads that are sometimes spoken of or depicted in the tombs of nobles as offerings. Dozens of different types with specific names: pat, hebenet, suet, some conical, some plaited, some enriched with honey or dates. It's a far cry from your everyday Emma loaves. Perhaps those fancy bakers in the temple kitchens or the Pharaoh's own household have different ingredients, different ovens, maybe even more than one pair of hands. The exact division of labor within ancient Egyptian bakeries of different scales, from small, one-person household operations like yours to large temple or state-run institutions that could churn out thousands of loaves, is still analyzed by scholars. They ponder the roles of men and women. Tomb scenes show both involved in baking, and the hierarchy between skilled master bakers and those performing the more menial tasks, like grinding. You, in your solitary domain, are the grinder, the mixer, the shaper, the oven master, and the cleaner-upper. A truly versatile professional. The sun climbs higher in the sky. The quality of light filtering through the high vents in your bakery shifts from the cool white of early morning to a warmer, more golden hue as midday approaches. The sounds from the village outside become more distinct. The chatter of people, the braying of a donkey, perhaps the distant rhythm of a craftsman's hammer. But within your bakery, the dominant sounds remain the thud of dough, the scrape of the peel, the crackle of the oven, if you've added a little more fuel to maintain its heat, and the glorious continuous perfume of baking, the pile of cooling. Loaves grows, a tangible testament to your steady labor. Each one is slightly different, bearing the individual marks of your hands and the oven's fiery kiss. There's a deep, quiet satisfaction in this accumulation, in transforming raw ingredients into this abundance. Only several more hours of this repetitive, back-breaking, yet strangely satisfying work to go. The original grind, you muse with a wry internal smile. Your mind, during these long stretches of repetitive work, might drift. Sometimes it's focused intently on the task at hand, particularly if a batch of dough feels a bit tricky. Other times, it might wander to thoughts of your small home, the taste of last night's simple stew, or the way the wind rustles the reeds by the riverbank. Or it might be blissfully blank, simply existing in the rhythm, in the warmth, in the sense. This is the unhurried cycle, the steady pulse of your extremely quiet life, where even in continuous production, a certain peace can be found. The day unfolds in its steady, unhurried rhythm of kneading, shaping, proofing, and baking. Your focus remains largely inward, a deep concentration on the tactile language of the dough, the fiery breath of the oven, the subtle alchemy of transformation. Your bakery is a cocoon of warmth, fragrant air, and the quiet sounds of your solitary labor. Yet, the walls of this sanctuary, though thick, are not entirely impermeable to the life stirring and bustling just beyond them. Faint echoes of the village and occasional brief interactions serve as gentle reminders that you are a part of a larger living tapestry, even if your thread is woven in a more secluded pattern. The sounds are the most constant connection. The village outside provides a kind of ambient soundtrack. Sounds of slightly disorganized rural life, Volume 3, you might dryly muse. It's mostly donkeys complaining with their distinctive mournful brays, a sound as Egyptian as the pyramids themselves. Children's voices, high-pitched and often surprisingly loud as they engage in some timeless game or squabble, filter in as fleeting bursts of energy. The rhythmic thud of a distant mallet might indicate a carpenter at work, or the whirring of a potter's wheel, if such artisans share your small community. Women's voices, more melodic, might drift by in conversation as they head to the village well or a communal washing spot by the canal. These sounds are muffled by your mud brick walls, softened by distance, rarely sharp enough to break your concentration, but present enough to paint a faint auditory picture of the life unfolding outside. They are like the gentle lapping of waves against the hull of a ship, a constant reminder of the sea beyond without disturbing the journey within. Occasionally a shadow darkens your doorway, signaling a more direct, though still brief, intrusion from that outer world. It's not a wraith from the underworld, usually just someone after a loaf of your renowned bread. Less dramatic, perhaps, but more immediately useful to both parties. It might be a child, sent by their mother, clutching a small piece of pottery, or a few reeds twisted into a loop as a token for the bread, or perhaps a household servant from one of the slightly more prosperous families in the village come to collect a regular order. These interactions are typically models of brevity. Words are often unnecessary or kept to a minimum. A questioning look from the newcomer, a nod from you towards the cooling loaves. Payment is often in kind, for this is largely a world of barter, especially for everyday transactions. Money, in the form of standardized coinage, is not yet a common feature of village life for ordinary folk. So, in exchange for a warm, fragrant loaf, you might receive a handful of freshly picked onions, a clutch of dark, sweet figs, a small pot of lentils, or perhaps a particularly enthusiastic promise from a satisfied customer to name their next goat after you. You generally prefer the onions, sometimes, especially for a regular or a slightly more complex order. A customer might have left a note on an ostrakon, a shard of broken pottery, or a flake of limestone, which were the ancient Egyptian equivalent of scrap paper. This note might bear a crude drawing of the number and type of loaves required, perhaps a few simple symbols. It's like ancient emojis for bread stat. The degree of literacy among common artisans like yourself is a point of ongoing scholarly debate. Formal scribal training was an arduous path to a privileged position, but some historians argue that a more practical, job-related literacy, the ability to understand simple tallies, marks, or symbols related to one's trade, might have been more widespread than previously thought. Whether you decipher the ostrakon through recognized symbols, or simply through a long-standing, mutually understood system with your customer, the message gets across. You hand over the bread. They deposit their offering of goods, perhaps with a grunt of thanks or a shy smile from a child. The conversation, if any, is brief. "Bread," you might hear. You'd grunt an affirmative, They'd receive it. "Good." Another, from you. Deeply philosophical stuff, really. You're basically the village Socrates, if Socrates mostly. Grunted and smelled powerfully of yeast and honest toil. Once the transaction is complete, the door is closed, or the visitor simply departs, and the outside world recedes again. You return to your kneading, your shaping, your oven tending, with barely a ripple in the calm surface of your concentration. Your regularly scheduled program of Zen and the art of dough management resumes almost immediately. These brief encounters are like stones dropped into a deep well. A momentary splash, then the stillness returns, perhaps with a few slowly widening ripples of thought. You might briefly wonder about the family who will eat this bread, the child who carried it away. But mostly, your focus snaps back to the task at hand. The weight and feel of the dough, the heat of the oven. Throughout the day, other faint echoes of the village reach you. The metallic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, if your village is large enough to support one. The bleating of goats being herded through the narrow pathways. The distant chanting from a small local shrine, if a particular rite is being observed. Each sound is a thread connecting you to the unseen life around you. You are not a hermit, after all. You are a vital part of this community, your craft essential. Though your interaction is limited, your contribution is deeply felt, or rather, deeply tasted. The sun climbs towards its zenith, its heat intensifying. The air in the bakery is thick and warm, heavy with the scent of continuous baking. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow, your linen kilt clinging damply to your back. Another batch of loaves is drawn from the oven, their crusts singing their crackling song. Another batch of dough is shaped and set to proof. The rhythm is unbroken. The pile of cooling bread grows, a satisfying testament to your enduring labor. These faint sounds and brief encounters are just enough to keep you tethered to the world, to prevent your quiet life from becoming an entirely isolated one. They are the gentle seasoning in the otherwise plain, wholesome fare of your daily solitude. They remind you that the bread you bake goes out into this village, into homes, into hands, becoming part of the fabric of other people's lives, even as you remain largely within the warm, flowery confines of your own. And as the day wears on, the thought of these connections, however fleeting, adds another subtle layer to the quiet satisfaction of your work. The sun, that relentless celestial taskmaster, has begun its slow descent from its zenith, and the fierce, almost frantic energy of peak baking hours starts to wane within your small bakery. Perhaps the last batch of loaves is now baking in the oven, which, having impersonated a miniature volcano for most of the day, is settling into a cozy ember phase, its initial fury mellowed to a deep, radiating warmth. Or maybe those final loaves are already out, adding their fragrant presence to the impressive array cooling on reed mats or wooden racks. The urgent rhythm of mixing, kneading, and shaping has given way to a more contemplative pace. The day's primary battle with dough and fire is drawing to a close. In this quieter interlude, as the intensity of your labor softens, you undertake the almost ritualistic task of accounting for the day. This isn't a matter of complex ledgers or abacuses. It's a practical, tactile assessment of resources given and bounty received. First, you turn your attention to the fruits of your labor, the bread itself. You count the loaves, your calloused fingers moving methodically over each warm, crusty dome or disc. You might have different sizes or types, and you note the quantities of each. 1, 2, 3. Your lips move silently, or perhaps you murmur the numbers softly, a quiet litany against the backdrop of the cooling oven. You count them once. Then, with the ingrained caution of anyone whose livelihood depends on accuracy, you count them again, just in case one of them spontaneously multiplied or eloped with a particularly attractive fig. Standard bakery procedure. Naturally, the total number brings a quiet sense of satisfaction, or perhaps a mental note that today's yield was slightly more or less than usual. This tally isn't just for abstract record. It informs how much is available for your regular collections, for any unexpected customers, and for your own household needs. Next, you assess your primary raw material, the grain. You approach the large clay jars where your emmer wheat is stored. Peering inside, you gauge the remaining level. You might plunge your arm deep into the cool, smooth kernels, feeling their quantity, judging by sight and feel how much has been depleted by the day's efforts. This is the ancient Egyptian equivalent of checking your bank balance, only significantly dustier and with a higher potential for attracting weevils if you're not meticulously careful about storage. Grain was true wealth in this land, the foundation of sustenance and stability. Careful management of it was crucial, from the grand state granaries down to your humble bakery stock. The scribes of great estates kept detailed records of grain harvests, storage, and distribution, a testament to its vital importance. Your own methods are simpler, but the underlying principle of stewardship is the same. You make a mental calculation. Is there enough for tomorrow's baking, or will you need to arrange for a new supply from the local farmer you barter with? Or perhaps from a central village store if such a thing exists. This thought leads to checking your other essential supplies. How is your stockpile of fuel for the oven? Those dung cakes and bundles of reeds burn down surprisingly fast. You glance at the corner where they are stored, noting if it looks alarmingly depleted. And then there's your most precious living ingredient, the sourdough starter. Your yeasty little Tamagotchi, as a time traveler might call it. It has worked hard today, leavening batch after batch. Now it needs to be fed, replenished, to ensure its vitality for tomorrow. You take a small amount of fresh flour and water, mixing them into the remaining starter, giving it a good stir. This act of feeding is crucial. A neglected starter will weaken and die, and with it, your ability to bake the light, flavorful bread your customers expect. If you forget, it gets very sulky and refuses to bubble with enthusiasm, a tiny rebellion in a pot. Your accounting system is highly sophisticated in its own way. You might make a series of scratches on a less used section of the mud brick wall with a pointed stick or a piece of charcoal, a line for each type of loaf, or a mark for every 10. These symbols might vaguely resemble confused birds or a scattering of twigs, but they make perfect sense to you mostly. Or perhaps you use an ostrakon, a large pottery shard, keeping a running tally with a smudge of charcoal. Small pebbles moved from one pile to another could also serve the purpose. These simple methods are the grassroots of record keeping. While this practical accounting takes place, A more metaphorical counting often accompanies it, the counting of blessings. You are here, in the relative cool down of the late afternoon. The oven, though a temperamental beast, has behaved itself today, yielding good heat without cracking or collapsing. You've avoided any serious burns, a constant hazard of your profession. The dough, for the most part, has been cooperative. These are the small, everyday blessings of a craftsman's life, often overlooked but deeply felt in these quieter moments of reflection. You count your blessings. 1. Still have most of your eyebrows after a day spent peering into the fiery maw. 2. No major dough explosions or catastrophic oven failures. 3. The very real and increasingly tempting possibility of rest and sleep in just a few more hours. It truly is the little things that make up the sum of a contented life. Some ancient Egyptians believed in a concept of Heka, or magic, that permeated everyday life, and that even ordinary objects or actions could have magical significance. Perhaps certain shapes of bread, beyond their practical purpose, were also seen as minor talismans, or the act of baking itself a kind of everyday alchemy that brought blessings. Some tomb scenes depict oddly shaped loaves or cakes being offered, suggesting a ritualistic or symbolic dimension that went beyond mere sustenance. While your daily work is grounded in practicality, you might feel a faint echo of this ancient sense of wonder at the transformation you witness and enact each day. The atmosphere in the bakery is subtly changing. The intense, almost oppressive heat of midday baking has lessened. The air is still very warm, but comfortably so, like the embers of a dying fire. The light filtering through the high vents is softer, tinged with the golden or even slightly orange hues of late afternoon. Long, distinct shadows stretch across the floor. The predominant smell is now that of cooling bread, a gentler, sweeter fragrance than the intense aroma of active baking. The sounds from the village outside might also be changing. Perhaps a lull as people rest before evening activities, or the sounds of animals being brought in from the fields. This quiet ritual of accounting is not just about numbers and supplies. It's a way of bringing closure to the main productive effort of the day. It's a mental reset. The exact methods and extent of economic planning or forecasting in small-scale artisanal production in ancient Egypt remains somewhat elusive for scholars. They debate whether bakers like you operated purely reactively, baking what you thought you could sell or what was ordered each day, or if there was a more structured, albeit simple, system of resource management and planning for future needs. Your current actions, assessing stock, anticipating tomorrow, suggest a blend of both. As you finish your tallies and feed your starter, your thoughts naturally turn towards the evening and the day to come. The quiet ritual of accounting has paved the way for the final tasks of cleaning and closing up, ensuring that when you return before the next dawn, you can begin the cycle anew with a measure of order and preparedness. The waning day brings with it a waning of active labor, but a waxing of quiet contemplation. The last of the day's heat from the great clay oven now radiates with a gentler, almost benign warmth. The fierce roar of its morning blaze has long since softened into a deep sighing breath of embers, and even those are now likely fading to a soft internal glow, like a sleeping dragon's belly. The final batch of bread, if there was one late in the day, is cooling amongst its brethren, adding its quiet perfume to the bakery's richly scented air. The main surge of production, the heart of your workday, has undeniably passed. Now, as the sun outside begins its slow descent towards the western horizon, painting the sky in hues you can only guess at from within these thick walls, your focus shifts to the final, essential rituals, restoring order to your workspace, answering. Evening's gentle cool. There's a quiet satisfaction in this phase of the day. The frantic energy is gone, replaced by a more methodical, almost meditative series of tasks. You embark on the great flower dust migration of late afternoon, taking up a broom made of bundled reeds or palm fibers. With slow, sweeping strokes, you encourage the stubborn patches of flour, the scattered bits of dried dough, the fine grey ash that has escaped the oven, and all the other miscellaneous detritus of a busy baking day to relocate from the floor to, well, a designated pile that will then be scooped up and disposed of. Perhaps it goes on to a refuse heap outside the village, or maybe some organic waste finds its way to a compost pile or animal feed, if such practices are in place. Next, you turn your attention to the kneading trough. Dried remnants of dough cling stubbornly to its sides, like ancient frescoes depicting your earlier struggles. Scraping this off requires a bit of elbow grease, using a blunt wooden scraper or a repurposed pottery shard. It's like a miniature archaeological dig sometimes, uncovering layers of your own previous efforts. Ah, yes, you might muse. I remember this particularly obstinate batch from mid-morning. It had character. Once scraped, the trough might get a wipe with a damp cloth, if water is used sparingly, or simply a thorough dry brushing, leaving it clean and ready for tomorrow's first embrace of flour and water. Work surfaces, benches, and any shelves that have accumulated a layer of the ubiquitous flour dust receive similar treatment. You wipe them down, the simple act restoring a sense of order, of cleanliness that is not just practical, but deeply satisfying. Ancient Egyptians, by many accounts, valued cleanliness, not merely for hygiene, but often with connotations of purity, especially in contexts involving food or religious observance. While your small bakery might not be subject to the rigorous purification rites of a temple, a clean workspace is a sign of a meticulous craftsman. You aim for a level of tidiness that would make a cleanliness-obsessed ibis, the sacred bird of Thoth, nod in solemn approval, or at least not actively try to fly away in disgust upon entering. Your tools, faithful companions in your daily labor, are next to receive your care. The long wooden peels, still warm perhaps, are scraped clean of any baked-on flour or dough remnants. Pottery bowls are emptied, scraped, and wiped. The heavy rubbing stone from the quern is brushed free of ingrained flour, as is the surface of the saddle quern itself, preventing the buildup of old, potentially rancid flour. These items are then stored neatly in their designated places. Peels hung on wooden pegs, bowls stacked, the rubbing stone resting beside its quern. Your tools are tucked in for the night, probably dreaming of all the exciting dough they'll get to meet tomorrow. Or maybe they just appreciate not being covered in sticky, demanding stuff for a few precious hours. The specific hygiene standards and cleaning practices within ancient Egyptian food production sites, particularly for small-scale village bakeries like yours, are not always explicitly detailed in surviving texts. Archaeologists often infer these practices from the physical remains of bakery sites, the presence of drains, the types of implements found, and from depictions in tomb scenes, leading to ongoing scholarly debate about the consistency and exact nature of such practices across different settings and social strata. You, however, follow the ingrained habits passed down or learned through experience, knowing that a clean bakery is a healthy bakery and a more pleasant place to begin the next day's toil. As you work, the light filtering through the high vents undergoes a noticeable transformation. The warm gold of late afternoon softens further, taking on richer orange and perhaps even pinkish tones as the sun dips lower. The shadows within the bakery lengthen dramatically, stretching across the floor, climbing the walls, creating a more subdued, peaceful atmosphere. It's the evening light, painting everything in hues that seem to whisper, Ra, the sun god, is definitely clocking off for his journey through the underworld, and perhaps, my good baker, so should you. The sounds from the village outside also begin to shift. The boisterous noises of midday activity, the cries of vendors, the chatter of busy people, may lessen, replaced by the sounds of families gathering, animals being brought into their pens for the night, perhaps the gentle strains of music from a nearby home where someone plays a simple reed flute. These are the sounds of the day winding down, mirroring your own actions. You might consider for a moment the disposal of waste. Where do those sweepings go? Perhaps there's a designated refuse area just outside the village, while some larger Egyptian households or temple complexes had more organized systems, perhaps involving cleanup crews, in the form of domesticated geese or pigs scavenging for edible scraps in outdoor areas, though certainly not inside your pristine bakery. Your own methods are likely simpler, but no less important for maintaining the health and order of your immediate environment. With the cleaning complete, a profound sense of order settles over the bakery. Everything is in its place. The floor is swept, the tools are clean, the trough awaits its future burdens. The air, though still carrying the faint, delicious ghost of baked bread, also has a cleaner, more settled quality. You stand for a moment, surveying your handiwork. There's a deep, quiet pride in this restored order, a feeling of completion that transcends mere tidiness. It's a respect for your craft, your space, and for the cycle of work itself. Your own body echoes this winding down. The aches from the day's labor are more pronounced now, a dull, heavy tiredness in your muscles and bones. But it's a good kind of tired, the fatigue of honest work, of purpose fulfilled. The anticipation of heading home, of rest, begins to grow stronger. One last look around. The bakery, now clean and quiet, seems to sigh contentedly in the fading light. Or maybe that's just you, projecting your own desperate need for a comfortable reed mat and the oblivion of sleep. The workday, with its fiery challenges and its fragrant rewards, has reached its gentle close. Evening has called, and you are nearly ready to answer. With a final satisfied glance around the now clean and orderly bakery, you pull the heavy wooden door closed. The click of the familiar wooden latch sliding into place is a sound of finality, a punctuation mark at the end of a long, laborious sentence. You secure it as best you can. Your high-tech wooden latch system, a marvel of ancient engineering, which you're confident will deter anyone who isn't particularly strong, determined, or, a small rodent with grand ambitions of flower larceny. The bakery, your warm, fragrant domain for so many hours, is now sealed, left to its own quietude until your return before the next dawn. you turn and step away, and the evening air embraces you like a cool, slightly damp apology for the oven's earlier enthusiastic roasting of your person. It's a welcome relief, this gentle coolness, carrying the sense of the approaching night rather than the intense aromas of baking. The oppressive heat of the day, trapped within the bakery walls, is already beginning to feel like a distant memory, though your skin still radiates a residual warmth. The light is magical, transitional. The sun itself has likely dipped below the horizon, or is just now kissing the distant western desert cliffs, leaving the sky awash in spectacular, though rapidly fading hues of orange, deep rose, and soft violet. Overhead, the deep indigo of full night is beginning to assert itself, and the first, boldest stars are pricking through, solitary diamonds in the vast expanse. Sirius, your pre-dawn companion, will soon hold court again, but for now, other celestial bodies make their tentative appearance. You set off on the familiar path homeward, the same dusty track you trod in the cool darkness of pre-dawn, but it feels entirely different now. Your pace is slower, heavier. Your legs have lodged a formal complaint about the day's extensive activities and are currently considering immediate strike action. You mentally promise them a nice, long sit-down and perhaps a gentle rub later, if you can summon the energy. Each step is an effort, yet there's a comforting rhythm to it. The simple act of putting one foot in front of the other, drawing you closer to rest. The sounds of the village are different too. The boisterous energy of midday has subsided. Now, you hear the more subdued noises of evening. The chirping of crickets and the croaking of frogs from the direction of the canals and irrigated fields provide a constant, soothing chorus. From nearby homes, you might hear the murmur of voices, families gathering, the occasional soft laughter of a child, or perhaps the gentle thrum of a simple harp or the melody of a reed flute, if one of your neighbors is musically inclined. Animals are settling down. The bleating of goats grows less frequent. A dog barks lazily in the distance. The village is settling into its evening quiet mode, which is like its daytime quiet mode, but with more crickets and the distant, muffled sound of someone perhaps regretting eating quite so much lentil stew for their evening meal. The air carries new scents. The aroma of wood smoke is more prevalent now, as cooking fires are lit in homes for the evening meal. The smell of roasting grains, simmering vegetables, perhaps even grilling fish if someone has had a successful day by the river, drifts enticingly. There might also be the faint, sweet perfume of night-blooming desert flowers, if any grow nearby, releasing their fragrance as the air cools. The dampness of the evening dew begins to settle on the earth and plants, releasing their earthy, green smells. As you walk, you pass homes where the soft, flickering glow of oil lamps can be seen through open doorways or unglazed window slits. These lamps, simple ceramic saucers filled with vegetable oil or animal fat and a linen wick, provide the only illumination. It's the ancient equivalent of mood lighting. If the mood you're consistently going for is can barely see 3 feet in front of you, but it's remarkably cozy and saves on expensive lamp oil. The light spills out in soft, wavering pools, creating islands of warmth in the growing darkness, offering brief, silhouetted glimpses of domestic life within. There are fewer people about on the pathways now. Those you do encounter are often, like you, heading home after a day's labor in the fields or at another craft. A silent nod, a tired but understanding glance, is the common currency of greeting. There's a shared sense of communal fatigue, of a day's work honorably completed. The nature and extent of leisure activities, or purely social interaction in ancient Egyptian villages after the workday, are subjects of ongoing research. While tomb scenes might depict banquets for the wealthy, or religious festivals for the community, the everyday evening routines for common folk are pieced together from more subtle clues. Perhaps families tell stories, or neighbors gather briefly to share news. But much of the evening was likely centered around the practicalities of preparing for the night and the next day, especially with limited and smoky indoor lighting. Your own thoughts are slow, drifting like smoke from an evening fire. The intensity of the day's focus has relaxed its grip. You might find yourself replaying a small moment from the bakery, the perfect rise of a particular batch of dough, the satisfaction of a well-managed fire. Or perhaps your mind is simply a quiet, empty space, too tired for complex cogitation, content to merely absorb the sensations of the cooling air, the fading light, the rhythmic movement of your own weary body. You might feel a deeper sense of the night's approach. While the village is relatively safe, the darkness beyond its familiar confines can hold real dangers. Wild animals from the desert fringe, or less tangible threats that ancient peoples often sought to ward off with amulets and household deities. Protective gods like Bez and Taweret, popular in households, were thought to guard against the perils of the night, watching over sleeping families. There's a subtle relief in heading towards the security of your own home before full darkness descends. The path under your bare feet feels different too. The dust, which was warm and dry in the morning, is now cool and slightly damp from the evening dew. Familiar landmarks, a distinctive tree, a large rock, a bend in the canal, look softer, more mysterious in the twilight. The world is slowly being hushed, draped in shadows. And then you see it. The familiar outline of your own small mud brick dwelling, perhaps a faint light already glowing from within if you share your home. Home. The word itself sounds like a comfortable reed mat and a distinct, wonderful lack of things needing to be kneaded, ground, or coaxed from a fiery inferno. Bliss. A small surge of anticipation, of longing for that simple comfort, might quicken your tired steps just a little. You reach your own doorstep, the end of this homeward journey. The cooling air has soothed your skin. The gentle sounds of the evening have calmed your mind, and the soft light of twilight has guided your weary feet. The day's external labors, the demands of the bakery, are now truly complete. You have brought your skill and energy to the task, and now you have brought yourself home. You push open the simple wooden door to your dwelling, a familiar creak accompanying its movement. Stepping across the threshold, you are enveloped by the unique atmosphere of home. It's a subtle shift from the outside world, yet profoundly different. The air within is still, carrying the faint, lingering scent of cool earth from the mud brick walls, perhaps a trace of wood smoke from a previous cooking fire, and the overarching, comforting aroma of your own quiet existence. Home's sweet mud brick home, where the Wi-Fi is weak, non-existent actually, for several more millennia, but the sense of not being at work anymore is incredibly, powerfully strong. You close the door behind you, the soft thud echoing briefly in the small space. Perhaps you slide a simple wooden bar into place, a customary gesture of securing your haven for the night, though true security here relies more on community trust and the general lack of things worth stealing from a humble baker's abode. The twilight that was painting the village outside has deepened, and within your home, without the benefit of even those high bakery vents, the darkness is almost complete. Your first act is to bring forth light. You feel your way to the small niche where your oil lamp, a simple saucer of fired clay, rests with its linen wick and a small supply of precious castor oil or perhaps rendered animal fat. With a practiced hand, you find your flint and a small piece of iron pyrite, or perhaps you carefully coax a flame from the embers of your small hearth if it was banked from an earlier meal. A few sparks, a patient breath, and the wick catches, sputtering at first, then settling into a small, steady flame. You light your trusty oil lamp, which valiantly battles the encroaching darkness with all the ferocity of a slightly damp kitten. It's definitely more about creating a comforting, focal ambience than providing actual widespread illumination. The flame casts a warm, flickering golden glow on the immediate surroundings, pushing the deeper shadows into the corners of your one-room home, making the familiar shapes of your few possessions emerge softly. Before anything else, the desire to wash away the physical remnants of the day's toil is strong. You move to a corner where a larger pottery jar holds cool water. Pouring some into a shallow basin, you splash it onto your face, your hands, your arms, scrubbing away the layers of flour dust, soot, and sweat. The water is cool and incredibly refreshing, a small, vital ritual that marks a separation between the labor of the bakery and the repose of home. Now, your thoughts turn to your evening meal. It will be modest as always, but eaten with a deep appreciation born of hunger and honest fatigue. Perhaps you have a portion of a simple lentil or vegetable stew cooked earlier in the day or even the day before, kept in a lidded pot. You might gently reheat it over the very low embers of your small hearth, if you have one inside, or perhaps it's eaten cool. Alongside it, naturally, will be bread, a piece of one of the loaves you brought back from the bakery today. Its crust still fairly crisp, its crumb dense and satisfying. Maybe there's a raw onion for pungent crunch, a few sweet dates for dessert, or a small piece of goat's cheese if you've been fortunate in your bartering. Dinner is a gourmet affair of sorts. More bread, surprise. A hearty stew that's perhaps 90% good intentions and 10% actual vegetables, and the lingering, satisfying taste of righteous exhaustion. You settle down to eat, not at a formal table, but perhaps seated on your reed sleeping mat, or on a low three-legged stool, your plate a simple pottery bowl held in your lap, or placed on the clean-swept earth floor. Ancient Egyptian commoner homes, typically constructed from readily available mud brick, were functional and relatively sparse. Furniture was minimal, woven reed mats for sleeping and sitting, low stools or benches, perhaps a wooden chest for storing linens or valuables, and various pottery vessels for food, water, and storage. Flat roofs were common and often used for sleeping or carrying out domestic tasks during the hotter parts of the year, extending the living space. You eat slowly, savoring each mouthful. There is no rush now. The day's demands are done. The food, however simple, tastes incredibly good. The bread has that unique, nutty flavor of emmer, the stew its earthy comfort. The quiet in your home is a special kind of quiet. It's the sound of no one needing anything from you especially not another loaf of emmer bread, or for the oven to be hotter, or for the grain to be ground finer. Pure, unadulterated bliss. The only sounds might be the soft crackle of the oil lamp, the gentle sigh of your own breathing, the distant, muted chirp of a cricket that has somehow found its way inside, or the very faint, almost imperceptible, sounds of the village settling entirely into night beyond your walls. The solitude is profound. You might find yourself thinking, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Then you might think, if a baker eats a loaf of his own bread in an empty hut, does anyone care about the carb count? Probably not. The solitude is so deep you could hear your own thoughts thinking, which are mostly variations on, stew, so tired, bread again tomorrow, must remember to fix that loose handle on the peel, sleep soon. Your muscles, which were merely aching earlier, are now singing the full, heartfelt opera of Ode to a Day Well Spent, mostly involving stooping, lifting, and intense heat. It's not a particularly catchy tune, but it's very sincere. As you eat, you consciously relax those tired limbs. You might stretch out your legs, lean back against the cool mud brick wall, letting the day's tension slowly seep away. The composition and true nutritional adequacy of the daily diet for an average ancient Egyptian commoner like yourself is something scholars continue to piece together. They analyze botanical remains from archaeological sites, residues in pottery, isotopic signatures in human bones, and glean information from texts and depictions, debating seasonal variations and the true extent of access to different protein sources beyond the ubiquitous fish from the Nile. You, however, are simply grateful for this warm food and the feeling of a full belly. Perhaps you have a quiet, unobtrusive companion. Not a human one, in this narrative of quiet solitude, but maybe a small, silent gecko, a regular visitor you've come to recognize, clings to the wall near the lamp, its unblinking eyes like tiny black beads. Your roommate, a distinguished gecko, who pays its rent in silent judgment of your life choices, watches you eat. Or maybe it's just patiently trying to calculate the trajectory to a stray crumb you might drop. Some Egyptians did keep various animals as pets. Cats were, of course, revered and common. But even monkeys, gazelles, or birds were sometimes part of a household, though perhaps less so in the most modest of dwellings. Your gecko, if he exists, asks for nothing and offers only its silent, scaly presence. The meal finished, you carefully clean your bowl and spoon, if you used one, with a little water, wiping them with a cloth. Every resource is used mindfully. The remnants of your meal are disposed of carefully. The domestic quiet deepens. The day's fatigue, now fully acknowledged, settles upon you like a heavy, comforting cloak. Your eyelids feel heavy. The flickering lamplight, once a welcome beacon, now seems to invite sleep. You have navigated the demands of another day, transforming humble ingredients into the staff of life for your community. You have tended the fire, wrestled the dough, and managed your small enterprise with skill and diligence. Now, within the simple peace of your own four walls, the focus shifts entirely inward, towards the profound and necessary restoration of sleep. The hearth has provided its comfort, your home its shelter, and the quiet its soothing balm. The remnants of your simple evening meal are cleared away. Your humble dwelling is secured against the deepest part of the night, and an all-encompassing weariness profound and bone deep, calls to you with an undeniable insistence. The small, flickering flame of your oil lamp, which has valiantly held back the shadows, now seems to droop, as if in sympathy with your own flagging energy. It's time to surrender to the ancient restorative magic of sleep. With slow, deliberate movements, you make your final preparations for the night. Perhaps a last sip of cool water from the jar, a final glance around your small, familiar space, ensuring everything is as it should be. Then, you reach for the oil lamp. Cupping your hand around its small flame, or perhaps using a small piece of pottery to gently snuff it, you extinguish the light. You plunge your world into a darkness so profound, it makes your eyelids feel like lead weights, which at this point, after the day you've had, is definitely a feature, not a bug. The absence of even that tiny flame allows the true, velvety blackness of the Egyptian night, far from the artificial glare of any future cities, to reclaim your home. Your other senses, momentarily heightened, register the deep, enveloping silence. You feel your way to your sleeping mat, the familiar rectangle of woven reeds spread upon the cool, packed earth floor. It's not luxurious, but it is yours, the place where your body finds its nightly repose. Your reed mat, the epitome of ergonomic ancient design, welcomes your weary bones. It seems to whisper, in its own rustling way, I will now proceed to remember every single contour of your spine by morning, with varying degrees of accuracy. You lower yourself onto it, the movement a mixture of relief and the dull ache of muscles that have been pushed to their limits and beyond. You arrange your simple linen covering if the night air carries a chill, and position your carved wooden headrest. This curious device, cool and unyielding beneath your neck, is meant to elevate your head, perhaps, as some believed, to keep troubling spirits or crawling insects at bay, or to facilitate clearer dreams. Egyptians certainly placed importance on dreams, viewing them as potential messages from the gods or omens. Some even kept dream interpretation guides. Tonight, however, your primary hope from your headrest is simply that it doesn't leave you. With too crickety a neck come morning, maybe you have a small worn amulet tucked beneath it, something with a carving of Bes or Taweret, those fierce yet benevolent household guardians, for added protection during the vulnerable hours of sleep. A common practice for many. Lying there in the darkness, you feel the full weight of the day pressed down upon you. Every muscle from your shoulders that turned the rubbing stone to your legs that carried you to and fro sends a tiny, sleepy thank you note to your brain for finally calling it a day. They'll no doubt send their detailed invoices for necessary repairs and recuperation in the morning, probably in the form of more aches. For now, though, there is only the profound relief of stillness, of horizontality. You take a deep, slow breath, and then another, consciously letting go of the tensions of the day. Your thoughts, which earlier might have been occupied with the practicalities of baking or the quiet observations of your home life, now begin to unravel, to drift like a poorly wound ball of yarn being batted about by a very sleepy, invisible kitten. Coherence is vastly overrated at this late hour. Fragments of the day might float through your mind. The warm smell of the first batch of bread, the red glow of the oven's heart, the texture of dough beneath your hands, the muffled sounds of the village. These images are no longer sharp or demanding, but soft-edged, like watercolor paintings left out in a gentle rain. The silence of your dwelling is profound, but not entirely empty. As your hearing attunes to the deep night, you might become aware of the faintest sounds, the almost inaudible rustle of the wind around the corners of your mud brick home, the distant rhythmic chirping of crickets, a sound so ancient it might have been the very first lullaby. Perhaps, if you live close enough to the Nile or its canals, the incredibly faint, almost felt rather than heard murmur of its timeless passage, or the chorus of frogs celebrating the coolness of the night. The land itself seems to hum a deep, ancient lullaby, or maybe that's just your own tinnitus acting up after another long day near the roaring, crackling oven. Either way, it's quite soothing. You can feel the cool night air on your skin, perhaps drifting gently through the small ventilation slit high in the wall. It carries no scent of smoke or baking now, only the clean, neutral aroma of the desert, night, or the dampness of dew settling on the earth outside. Your breathing deepens, slows, becomes more regular. The boundary between wakefulness and sleep begins to blur. You are a baker, a shaper of sustenance from earth and fire. Your life is one of cycles, the daily cycle of labor and rest, the seasonal cycle of flood and harvest that governs the grain you use, the generational cycle of life and death. Tonight, you are entering the most personal of these cycles, the nightly surrender to oblivion that allows the body and spirit to mend, to prepare for the renewal of dawn. The grand tombs and temples speak of elaborate journeys through the underworld for the deceased pharaohs and nobles. But for common folk, the nightly journey into sleep, into the land of dreams, was perhaps its own mystery, its own small death and rebirth. The exact nature of ancient Egyptian commoners' beliefs about the afterlife and how it connected to their daily piety, beyond the grand state-sponsored funerary cults, is an area where historians often find more questions than definitive answers, relying on the interpretation of simpler grave goods and local customs. Such profound thoughts, however, are too heavy for this moment. They dissolve like mist as sleep beckons more insistently. You feel yourself drifting, not on a grand solar bark sailing through the Duat with Ra, but on a much more comfortable and immediate vessel, constructed of pure, unadulterated exhaustion, sailing gently towards the quiet shores of oblivion, or at least, with any luck, a solid few hours of undisturbed rest. The aches in your body begin to fade from sharp complaints into a dull, distant thrum. The last, coherent thoughts dissolve into a wash of peaceful sensation. Your quiet life, with its routines and its small satisfactions, its hard work and its simple comforts, gently releases its hold on your consciousness. You are sinking now deeper and deeper into the warm, dark, welcoming embrace of sleep. The Nile, the ancient life-giving river that defines this land, flows on, its pulse steady and eternal, and you, one of its countless humble children, dissolve into that timeless rhythm, surrendering to its ancient, soothing lullaby. The baker sleeps. Now, allow the story to gently fade as you too prepare for your own rest. The sounds of the ancient village are far away, the heat of the Egyptian day a distant memory. There is only the soft darkness, the gentle cadence of your own breathing, and the comforting knowledge that, just as the baker found peace in the quiet of his home, you too can find tranquility in this moment. The air around you feels cool and still. Imagine the profound silence of that ancient night, broken only by the faintest whispers of nature. The distant rustle of reeds, the soft sigh of a gentle breeze making its way across the desert sands, carrying with it the scent of coolness and vast open spaces. There are no jarring noises here, no artificial lights to disturb the deep, velvety darkness that blankets the land. It is a darkness that invites rest, a silence that allows the mind to finally let go of all the day's concerns, all the little anxieties and lists that tend to clutter our waking hours. Feel your own body sinking deeper into your comfortable bed, much like the baker surrendered to his simple reed mat. Let your muscles release any lingering tension. Imagine the weariness of a long day's honest labor, the kind of fatigue that makes sleep not just a necessity, but a profound, welcome relief. Every part of you earned this rest. Your shoulders, your back, your arms, your legs, they can all grow heavy now, pleasantly heavy, anchored by a comforting gravity. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. This time is purely for you, for quiet, for restoration. The baker's thoughts, as he drifted off, became simple, fragmented, finally dissolving into the peace of unconsciousness. Allow your own thoughts to follow a similar path. If any worries or plans try to surface, just acknowledge them gently and then let them float away, like small, inconsequential leaves on a slow-moving stream. They are not for now. Now is for the quiet spaces between thoughts, the gentle descent into true repose. Imagine the vastness of the night sky above that small mud brick home, a canopy of brilliant, unpolluted stars, far more numerous and vibrant than most of us ever see. Each star, a silent, ancient witness to countless nights like this one, countless souls surrendering to sleep. There is a deep sense of continuity in this, a connection to all who have sought rest under these same ancient skies. The problems and triumphs of one small life, one single day, find their proper perspective under such an immense and timeless gaze. The Nile continues its ageless journey to the sea, a constant, life-giving presence, its rhythm a metaphor for the enduring cycles of nature, of life, of rest and renewal. Feel yourself becoming part of that gentle, flowing rhythm. There is a profound peace in surrendering to these larger currents, in letting go of the need to strive and control, and simply allowing yourself to be carried into the calm harbor of sleep. The baker's world was one of simple, tangible things. The feel of grain, the warmth of dough, the heat of fire, the taste of freshly baked bread. As you drift, perhaps your mind can touch upon simple, comforting sensations too. The softness of your pillow, the gentle weight of your blanket, the steady, reassuring beat of your own heart, a quiet drum tapping out a rhythm of peace. The last vestiges of the day are fading completely now. The story of the ancient Egyptian baker has reached its gentle end for tonight. His world, so distant in time, yet so familiar in its human need for purpose, for sustenance, for rest, now dissolves back into the quiet mists of history. All that remains is the deep, soothing quiet, the comfortable darkness, and the promise of restorative sleep. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are ready to drift away. Let the ancient lullaby of the Nile, the timeless pulse of the land. Cradle you as you too surrender to the deep embrace of sleep.